Many games out there put up a good fight, but deep down you can tell they're rooting for you, and the games we're talking about today aren't those games. These games are designed to chew up your patience as much as they do your free time, and still leave you thirsting for more punishment like the good little masochist you are. So don't forget to take a shot of Jack Daniels every time you hear the word spreadsheet, and be ready to be waterboarded with the type of complexity that teaches you to suffer as much as it teaches you to adapt, that teaches you to hate as well as it teaches you how to love. Starting with number 1, Terra Invicta. Terra Invicta is what happens when a geopolitical simulator, a space colonization game, and a conspiracy board all merge into one terrifying Excel sheet. This early access title throws you into a fractured Earth facing an alien arrival. But instead of playing a world leader, you're steering one of 7 ideological factions, each with wildly different plans for humanity's future. Whether you're trying to defend Earth, or flee it, or surrender to the aliens, or just monetize the apocalypse, everyone agrees on one thing: the real enemy is whoever disagrees with you. The gameplay unfolds as so. First, you're spreading influence, destabilizing governments, and building covert networks on Earth like it's a game of Risk directed by John le Carre. Then, just when you figure out how to coup a superpower without causing World War III, the game zooms out, literally, and you're launching space stations, colonizing moons, and constructing combat-ready ships in orbit. Battles use real-world orbital mechanics, so positioning and velocity actually matter. It's not enough to build a bigger gun, you also need to make sure it's facing the right way and not drifting into Saturn's gravity well. Underneath it all is a tangled mess of shared and faction-specific tech trees, with research topics ranging from diplomacy to alien autopsy to, what if we just nuke the sky again? The alien threat will evolve slowly, starting with probes and ending in full-on space warfare, with each reaction depending on how pokey or aggressive you've been. Play it slow, and they might infiltrate half the planet before you notice. Strike early, and they'll retaliate like you're the main character in a sci-fi horror movie, because you probably are at that point. The UI is dense, the pace is glacial, and yes, there are spreadsheets, but for the right kind of person, this game scratches the part of your brain that whispers just one more turn until sunrise. Number 2, Exanima. Exanima throws you into a shadowy, half-collapsed dungeon and hands you a combat system powered by real physics, where every swing and collision is calculated in bone-snapping detail. Weapons have weight, armor has heft, and your character's body reacts like it's got knees made of spaghetti. Fighting feels like trying to stay upright in a bar brawl inside a broom closet, and winning often comes down to which one of you stops swinging last. You are without a minimap, and there's no scripted narrative to guide you. Progress is carved through exploration, scavenging, and learning from everything the dungeon throws at you. Items are placed in naturalistic places, enemies roam independently, and every room you open feels like a gamble between loot, lore, or a guy with a halberd ready to cleave your face off. Healing is limited, saves are infrequent, and your gear is only as good as your ability to use it. Victory means using every scrap of metal and each stroke of luck to outthink a world where every enemy has your number. But that's just the surface. Exanima layers in thaumaturgy, an esoteric system of powers that bends the rules just enough to give you options, but never security. You'll interact with puzzles, traps, and enemies that adapt to your behavior, forcing you to refine your approach constantly. There's no randomization for the sake of variety. It all exists to be understood and eventually outmaneuvered. But that's the joy. You start to find that progress, however small, starts to feel like triumph once you understand just how unforgiving this world really is. Number 3. Amazing Cultivation Simulator. Your sect is small, your knowledge incomplete, and the heavens indifferent, but in Amazing Cultivation Simulator, persistence is divine currency. You lead a sect of cultivators in a mythic version of ancient China, where spiritual progression is a daily grind of meditation, martial arts, alchemy, and architectural micromanagement. Every disciple has unique affinities, and their path to power must be carefully guided through training routines, elemental harmony, and dietary choices that might involve century eggs or demon blood. Your sect is your home, your fortress, your laboratory, and your spiritual pressure cooker. And if someone's bedroom happens to interfere with the local key flow, well, enjoy the thunderstorm. Progress hinges on mastering the game's cultivation system, a tangled lattice of stats, temperaments, personality traits, and elemental balances that govern whether a disciple becomes immortal or explodes in a puff of existential regret. The 5 elements wood, fire, earth, metal, and water affect nearly everything, from how well your crops grow to whether your toilet curses the user. Buildings radiate either good or bad feng shui depending on their shape and placement, which means a poorly angled chair can genuinely ruin someone's shot at transcendence. It's base building reimagined as spiritual landscaping, and it's more satisfying than it has any right to be. Especially once you realize that, you can train a pig to achieve inner peace. Outside your sect's walls, the world is just as complicated. You'll deal with rival factions, spiritual beasts, natural disasters, and NPCs who show up demanding wine or revenge. Sometimes both. The game is full of storylines, rare materials, ancient ruins, and very poor decisions disguised as opportunities. And when the difficulty spikes, which it will, you'll be grateful for the thriving mod scene that adds everything from new cultivation paths to sanity-saving UI tweaks. This is a game that expects your full attention and rewards it with layered, emergent storytelling and systems so deep that they might need their own breathing exercises. Number 4. Foxhole. In Foxhole, war isn't won with reflexes, it's won with spreadsheets, fuel trucks, and 400 people all arguing at once about logistics. This massively multiplayer war sim plays out across a persistent world map where everything down to the last bullet, bunker, and bread loaf is player-made. Unlike many other war games, you aren't just fighting the battle, you manufacture the weapons, haul the materials, build the bases, and try to survive the front lines you helped to construct. It's a living supply chain with a kill counter, and the difference between victory and disaster often hinges on whether someone remembered to gas up the truck before driving into artillery range. The complexity scales up fast. Infantry, tanks, ships, artillery, aircraft, it's all here, and none of it is plug and play. Vehicles require maintenance, shells have to be manufactured, and artillery pieces don't fire unless someone, somewhere, is mining sulfur. Base building isn't all about aesthetics, it's strategic survival engineering, and if you put the spawn point next to an unarmored wall, it won't be there by morning. And while the game has no traditional leveling system, you'll feel your experience growing with every failed flank, botched landing, or team-wide debate about which road to pave first. The real challenge, though, is human. Foxhole lives or dies by communication. Organized, chaotic, often unintentionally hilarious communication. Players divide themselves across factions and work together, or not, in real time, across logistics, construction, and military roles. Voice chat is key. Planning is everything, and trust is earned one shovelful at a time. It's a game where the front line is constantly in motion, and the guy yelling in local chat about forgetting the anti-tank ammo might be your commanding officer. For players willing to learn the systems and endure the occasional supply crisis meltdown, it delivers one of the most unique, large-scale multiplayer strategy experiences ever conceived. Number 5. Fear and Hunger. This one does not ease you in. It hurls you into the pit, and there's nothing good in the pit. This is a survival RPG where permadeath is just the start of your problems. You're going to be managing hunger, sanity, injuries, and curses while trying not to step on a spike trap or get devoured by an ancient god. Every interaction, whether it's saving your game, opening a door, or cutting off someone's limbs, is bound to a coin toss mechanic. And yes, it's exactly as cool as it sounds. There's no tutorial, there's nothing to soften the blow, no guarantee that your choices will do anything anything but make things worse for you, and they often do. The combat system is sadistic. You target individual limbs in battle, but so do your enemies, and they're usually faster, stronger, and in a lot worse mood. There's no traditional leveling. Killing doesn't necessarily make you stronger, so you're often better off avoiding conflict altogether. Meanwhile, your party of misfits can grow, die, or betray you depending on circumstances you might not fully understand until it's too late. Exploration is its own death trap, full of randomized events, puzzles, cryptic symbols, and creatures that feel like they crawled out of a medieval medical journal. The game teaches you through failure, often sudden, always unforgiving, and expects you to keep going anyway. What makes Fear and Hunger uniquely punishing is how thoroughly it entangles gameplay and lore. The story isn't delivered so much as embedded, found through forgotten books, conversations with madmen, or rituals you might regret performing. Class choice changes everything, with different abilities and backstories unlocking new paths and new ways to suffer. The world is dripping with psychological horror, from its grotesque aesthetic to the way it weaponizes randomness against your best laid plans. Multiple endings, unpredictable runs, and a dynamic structure ensure that mastery requires repetition, experimentation, and a slightly masochistic mindset. If you're looking for comfort, run. But if you're looking to stare into the void and you want a game that stares back at you, this is it. Oh yeah, and a sequel came out in 2022, so yeah, have fun with that one too. Up next is Football Manager 2024. Ain't nothing out there gonna prepare you for Football Manager 2024. You will not just be picking out formations and watching them go at it. You're orchestrating the lives of 40-plus athletes, appeasing board members, navigating locker room egos, scouting wonder kids in Iceland, and trying to explain to your assistant why the striker with 19 finishing can't score a goal. Every screen is packed with charts, drop-downs, and metrics that sound like they belong in a hedge fund. Success, if it means anything, means reading the fine print on the left back's contract clause and knowing when to pull a midfielder for tactical discipline, or because he just got into an argument with your physio. Yeah. The game's tactic system is more than just sliders and presets though. You can micromanage every player role, every press angle, and every single set piece until your team plays like a human spreadsheet. But the AI is not static. It adapts, counters, and sometimes embarrasses you with tactics you didn't even know you had set. What begins as a clever 4-3-3 can crumble into a panic spiral because you underestimated how much your players hate being asked to mark tighter. It's like teaching a dozen jazz musicians to play a symphony while the opposing orchestra changes instruments mid-performance. And on top of all of that, fun, there's finances to juggle, board expectations to meet, youth players to develop, media to placate, and a fanbase that'll riot if you don't sign a 17-year-old named Julio. The scouting network alone could be its own standalone game. Every decision ripples forward. Fail to negotiate a contract properly, and you might tank morale, blow the wage budget, or accidentally promise the Champions League glory to a third-tier winger. It's overwhelming, but absorbing, and completely brilliant. If your idea of fun involves spreadsheets, transfer gossip, and crying to your inbox at 2 a.m. because your star midfielder broke his ankle during training, look no further. Number 7. Elite Dangerous. What we have here, Space Cadets, is a fully realized space sim where the Milky Way is recreated at scale, star by star, system by system. You pilot a ship through a galaxy of more than 400 billion star systems, taking on roles as varied as cargo hauler, bounty hunter, long-range explorer, miner, smuggler, or political operative. Everything in the game is player-driven, from where you go to what you do to how you'll make a living. There's no central narrative at all, and instead you're handed a ship, dropped into the void, and left to chart a career across black holes, pirate-infested routes, and faction-controlled war zones. Freedom is the default setting, and figuring out your path is half the game. Your ship will function like a miniature power plant, with every module drawing from the same limited energy budget. Managing a build means understanding how to prioritize shields, engines, weapons, scanners, and life support across multiple combat and travel scenarios. Power draw, mass, heat, and internal internal compartment space all factor into performance, and it's possible to engineer ships down to precise travel distances and boost speeds. And combat uses 6 degrees of freedom flight with inertia and heat management, while trade involves market scouting, cargo balancing, and sometimes outrunning pirates in the dark. There's even a tool to plot fuel stops manually, because autopilot is a luxury this universe never considered. Beyond the cockpit, however, a network of political factions shifts constantly based on player activity. Your allegiances open access to special gear, locked territories, and influence over system control. And if you're the exploring type, you can venture weeks into uncharted space with nothing but star scans and geological surveys to keep you company. Fleet carriers let you run mobile operations across sectors, and if you're brave enough, you can land on planets and mine their surfaces, or even get out and walk around in first person thanks to the Odyssey expansion. Every layer brings another system to master, and each one feeds into the game's reputation as one of the most complex, player-driven sims in the galaxy. Up next, number 8, Caves of Cud. This here, ladies and gentlemen, is a text-saturated roguelike set in a post-apocalyptic far future, where ancient tech and fungal horrors coexist beneath the desert sands. The complexity hits from the character creation screen alone. You choose between being a mutated human or a truekin, that is a cybernetically augmented baseline human, and from there, the customization just explodes. Want to be a 6-armed telepath who communes with plants and emits radiation, or maybe a quadruped fireproof assassin who can clone themselves, control robots, and phase through walls? There are over 70 mutations, 24 cybernetic implants, and dozens of casts and callings, and a classless skill tree system with 120 plus learnable skills. The result is thousands of viable builds, and then you factor in faction alliances, procedurally generated relics, or cults that you might accidentally found while drinking from a sentient river, and you'll just be piquing what makes Caves of Cud so interesting. Every system, from reputation management and cooking-based alchemy to language translation and temporal fugu manipulation, feels like its own minigame. The combat can become more intense than camping, especially when you're dual-wielding flaming saws with telescopic arms and strategizing movement through fungally infected map tiles while a gravity pulse weapon charges 2 screens away. Even dying isn't simple. Permadeath is default, and success requires not just learning the mechanics, but the ecosystem and the lore. Understanding how to survive is one lesson. Understanding how to thrive with one of the game's near limitless builds, well, that's something else entirely. Number 9, Battle Brothers. This here is a tactical RPG about running a company of grim, underpaid mercenaries in a harsh medieval sandbox. You start with 3 nobodies, barely enough gear to go around, and 0 reputation. Just contracts to chase and bones to break. The combat takes place on a hex grid map with elevation, terrain effects, and line-of-sight challenges. Positioning is everything. There's an action point system, initiative tracking, and a zone of control mechanic that punishes sloppy movement. Whenever your favorite swordsman gets surrounded and loses a leg because you misjudged the terrain height, the game will apologize by auto-saving your mistake. Outside of all the sword swinging, you'll be juggling economic management, contract selection, equipment maintenance, injuries, food logistics, and morale. Every mercenary has a unique background, stats, and traits, some useful and some, well, not so much. One may be a former juggler with high initiative, while another a disfigured deserter with a drinking problem and no resolve. Level ups grant access to perks, and there are dozens, forming synergies and specialization trees that let you build everything from shield tanks to glass cannon archers. Unfortunately, you'll need a steady rotation of recruits, because in Battle Brothers, people die. All the time. What makes the game so brutalizing is how all the systems stack. Reputation affects contract offers, pay scales with party size, enemy parties scale with your strength. The map is procedurally generated, littered with roaming threats, hidden ruins, and events that can bless or ruin your campaign. You'll need to track food supplies and tools, weigh the cost of retreating mid-fight, and brace for random ambushes that test every decision you've made. With no main quest line, the challenge comes from survival itself. It's the sort of experience where surviving isn't victory, it's just an opportunity to limp into the next fight. And at number 10, ToriBash. So you don't have a kick button in ToriBash, but you do have dozens of tiny muscle toggles and a dream, and that's all you need. Every move is controlled by manipulating individual joints frame by frame, turning each match into a turn-based puzzle where your own body is the weapon, the problem, and occasionally the thing that flies off the screen. It's a fighting game with no combos, no blocking, and no quarter given to anyone who thinks reflexes will save them. Precision, timing, and knowledge of physics are everything, and it's entirely possible to rip your own arm off by accident, and in most cases it's pretty funny too. So the game plays out like martial arts chess filmed in stop motion. In one round you might carefully plan a spinning back fist that takes 5 turns to land, and the next you're trying to remember whether your left knee is contracted, extended, or somewhere in another plane of reality. Gravity, momentum, friction. They're all simulated in detail, and even the smallest change can end up summing to an unexpected carnage. Learning to control a full human figure this way feels like trying to perform ballet in a suit made of garage door springs. The fact that a thriving competitive scene grew out of this chaos is either inspiring or slightly concerning. Beyond all of that, though, there's a full character customization system, a sprawling modding community, and years of meta layered over replays and tournaments. Players trade techniques like secrets in a martial arts cult, and the difference between a novice and a grandmaster usually comes down to who spent more time dislocating their own shoulders for science. The UI takes work to master, and the skill ceiling is particularly lunar. But few games reward experimentation so explosively. Watching your ragdoll warrior gracefully decapitate someone across a ring after 13 turns of build-up is pure kinetic poetry. I'm looking at the Steam charts, and it looks like there's still a couple hundred people who play, so get out there and check it out. It's free, and there's also a mobile version, so you have no excuse. And number 11 is Highfleet. So this one operates like a war-torn hybrid of an engineering sim and a tactical war game. Set in a crumbling techno-feudal empire, it puts you in command of a strike force, 1 part admiral, 1 part logistician, and 1 part nervous mechanic. You'll design vertical takeoff warships from scratch, managing engines, fuel tanks, radar, power grids, and missile silos down to the component level. Every choice has weight, quite literally. Too much armor and you'll burn fuel faster than you can resupply. Too little and your flagship explodes in midair because you forgot to shield the fuel lines. And yes, you will learn this lesson the hard way. The warfare unfolds in real time, with ships that handle like flying fortresses, drifting and lurching with weight and momentum. Positioning matters, targeting systems matter, and forgetting to manually turn off your radar while sneaking through enemy territory really matters. On top of that, you'll need to scout with recon craft, intercept radio transmissions, decipher enemy positions, and decide whether to engage, evade, or strike preemptively. Each and every skirmish is a test of preparedness and improvisation, made worse by the fact that permadeath means losing a ship is a logistical and emotional punch in the gut. But on the periphery of all that, you're managing fuel consumption, repairs, trade negotiations, and the morale of a crew that can't afford another mistake. Cities might help you resupply or betray your position. Supply runs can be ambushed, every decision burns time and resources, and the map offers no safe routes, just slower ones. The UI is deliberately analog, full of knobs, dials, code wheels, and blinking lights that feel like you're piloting a Cold War submarine with a cassette deck. However, nothing feels ornamental, and everything feeds back into the central challenge, which is staying alive long enough to make the next decision count. Number 12. Kenshi. Kenshi plops you into a post-apocalyptic desert with bandaged arms, no map, and the only direction being good luck. It's a sandbox RPG with no main quest line and 0 guardrails. You're free to do anything. Build a city, become a bandit, lead a squad of cyborg monks, or just spend 20 hours trying to avoid being eaten by cannibals. Every faction has its own rules, alliances, and grudges, and the world reacts persistently to your actions. Kill a local warlord and the power structure will reshuffle. Raise your own town and you might find it besieged by slavers who won't appreciate the competition. Things do not stay static here, and the game never waits for you to catch up. Managing your group of misfits isn't just about stats and gear, it's about survival. Characters will get leveled up through use, can suffer permanent injuries, and can even lose limbs, which you can eventually replace with robotic parts if you live that long. Hunger, morale, and medical needs all matter. You can micromanage production lines in a fortress that you've built from scratch, while your scouts run trade routes through dangerous territory. Combat is real-time, though it does contain pause, and while it seems simple at first, mastery means understanding positioning, equipment weight, faction tactics, and knowing when to run like hell. The UI is thick, the system's interconnected, and there's no tutorial other than abject failure. But once you understand how things link together, how a trade run funds your walls, how a good medic keeps a soldier alive, or how every defeat can be learned from, it becomes a slow-burning epic. Every scar tells a story. The freedom is overwhelming at first, but it pays off in emergent stories that no other game could script. Kenshi is not a game that's played to be won. You play it to build something that lasts in a world that's constantly trying to get your goat. Number 13. Stormworks Build and Rescue. As the name suggests, it's not just about saving lives in this game, it's about engineering the machines that might get you there in one piece. You'll design everything from modular helicopters to ocean-capable rescue ships, wiring every component yourself and watching it all behave according to physics that you probably haven't thought about since high school. The building system here offers a staggering amount of freedom, but also demands precision. If your tail rotor's off by just a degree, you can expect to spiral like a mechanical corkscrew deep into the sea. Even the simplest rescue mission can go sideways if your fuel pump isn't routed properly or your battery dies mid-flight. Once you've got your feet off the ground, or wet, or whatever analogy you like, the open world will come into play. Missions will range from medical extractions in high seas to transporting cargo through electrical storms, and each one will demand a vehicle tailored for the job. Weather systems are dynamic, water will behave like an actual fluid, and the game's procedural world is full of hazards that don't really care how long you've spent designing your submersibles. And just to make sure you stay humble, there's a full-blown LUA scripting system for automating components, so if you'd like your cockpit to run on custom logic gates and code, it's right there waiting for you. Between the fuel costs, the upgrade economy, and the possibility of permadeath for your precious craft, every decision has weight. The UI is packed full, and the mission variety demands constant retooling of your designs. Play solo and juggle everything yourself, or bring in friends to divide roles between pilot, engineer, and person who panics loudly on the radio. Either way, Stormworks thrives on complexity and punishes shortcuts. Figuring problems out feels genuinely rewarding, especially when your half-finished prototype comes limping back to base with smoke pouring out of the engine and a passenger still alive in the backseat. Number 14. From the Depths. Of course, we know there are games that will challenge your reflexes, and others your patience, but then there's the ones that make you wonder if you accidentally signed up for an unpaid engineering internship, and this one falls in that category. From the Depths is a physics-driven sandbox where naval warfare, vehicle design, and real-time strategy all intersect, assuming you can get your first prototype to float in a straight line, of course. The game gives you tools to build war machines from scratch, and then puts those machines into a world that will happily dismantle them over the most minor of mistakes. Everything is governed by real-world mechanics and physics. Mass, drag, lift, fuel flow, structural stress. Your vehicles don't just move because you said so, they move if the engines are properly placed, the control surfaces are correctly linked, and the onboard power grid hasn't overloaded from 12 missile racks wired to the same battery. You'll end up building planes that stall, subs that flood, and tanks that flip if you don't balance their center of mass. And then you'll send them into battle across air, sea, and land, using AI systems that you'll either program yourself or just cross your fingers and hope that they don't glitch into a mountain. That scale of control will extend into the campaign, where you'll manage resources, defend territories, and take down enemy factions while dealing with weather systems and terrain that will affect your designs. There's a strategy layer, sure, but it's always connected to the shipyard. Everything you deploy is something you've built, tuned, and refined, and every loss is a blueprint flaw waiting to be fixed. For players who want total creative control and aren't afraid to see their own failures play out in massive explosions, this is your ticket. Number 15. Lobotomy Corporation. There's workplace stress, and then there's being the new hire at a facility that extracts energy from entities loosely described as abnormalities, while hoping they don't burst through containment and liquefy your whole staff. Inspired by SCP lore and Korean corporate horror, this game wraps management sim mechanics around deeply hostile systems. As stated, you're given control over a growing facility that's tasked with harvesting energy from monsters that you don't fully understand, you can't control, and that will absolutely punish you for underestimating them. Success, therefore, isn't about optimization so much as about surviving long enough to understand the rules without being told what they are. Every abnormality will have its own behavior and failure conditions, and those rules are hidden until you learn through trial, error, and occasionally mass casualty events. Some will attack if overworked, others if ignored, and a few are happy until someone just looks at them funny. Employees have stats that grow over time, but so do the stakes. Permadeath means each mistake can undo hours of investment. Facility upgrades, departmental unlocks, and research must be earned in a hostile environment with escalating threats, scripted disasters, and no clean path forward. Even the reading of tooltips has a feeling like reviewing legal documents during an exorcism. The interface is chock full, the pacing is cruel, and the design punishes guesswork with permanent loss. But beneath the panic is a layered strategy game with surprisingly sharp resource management, branching upgrades, and a narrative that gradually reveals itself in between containment breaches. The game doesn't play fair, but that's part of the appeal. Like any good manager, you'll be expected to learn on the job, and if your team gets torn apart by a clown-themed war crime in a containment pod, well, the next shift starts in 5 minutes. Number 16. GTFO. Around here, it's not enough to shoot well. You'll also need to sneak well, plan well, type well, and most critically, communicate without panicking when someone accidentally wakes up a room full of biological misfires that are in cryosleep. GTFO is a brutal, cooperative FPS designed to punish poor coordination and sloppy execution. You're not blasting through waves of enemies with bravado and big guns. You're entering the lion's den with flashlights off, whispering callouts, and praying nobody sneezes. From the very first mission, it sets the tone. Work together or die spectacularly. Each expedition drops your 4-person team into a sprawling underground labyrinth filled with traps, sleeping horrors, and the warden's cryptic objectives. Ammo is limited, medpacks are precious, and success means juggling stealth, inventory management, and split-second decisions under pressure. Enemies hit like trucks. Stealth is essential, and every loud mistake is the kind of thing that ends with someone screaming. Throw in terminals that require real command line input and multi-wave defenses that must be carefully staged, and it becomes clear you gotta get the fuck out of here. As you'll progress through increasingly punishing rundown tiers, the missions grow longer, the stakes higher, and the margin for error thinner. You'll rerun maps to practice timings, optimize loadouts for specific encounters, and decipher the game's bizarre lore through fragments and ominous voice lines. There ain't no hand-holding here, only trial, error, and slowly earned competence. If you want to survive, you're gonna need precision, patience, and 3 other people who won't alt F4 whenever the going gets tough. Number 17. Vintage Story. There is a world where the wind howls through ancient ruins, and the tools are chipped from stone, and survival is a painstaking ritual. And Vintage Story is that world, and has no interest in how many hours you've logged in other survival games. Every advancement here feels earned in blood and clay dust, as if the game is challenging you to outthink a Neolithic apocalypse. So what makes Vintage Story so complex is how much it asks you to understand before it lets you thrive. It's not enough to gather sticks and berries. You'll learn to knap flint, to mix clay into crucibles, and fire your first tools like you're reenacting the dawn of metallurgy. Seasons will cycle, the crops will wither, and food will rot if it's not preserved. The game simulates survival down to the molecular level, but it's the weirdness, the distorted creatures, temporal instability, and eerie ruins that keep you on edge. But even once you're established, the challenge won't let up. You'll need to prospect underground for metals, manage temperature during deadly winters, and prepare for increasingly hostile drifter attacks that ramp up in sync with your own progress. It's a survival sandbox where the systems don't just interlock, they spiral into each other. One mistake, one bad season, and the slow grind back to stability begins again. Number 18. Stellaris. In Stellaris, you shape the trajectory of an entire civilization across millennia, threading your way through diplomacy, ideology, and unknown galaxies where every action casts long shadows. But this galaxy isn't just a passive sandbox, it will evolve with you. Star systems will shift allegiances, empires fracture from within, and technologies that you thought were game changers might backfire spectacularly. The procedural generation ensures that every run unfolds with its own tangled web of opportunities and crises, and you'll be left managing expansion and survival in a world with constantly shifting rules. The real head-scratching, however, comes from how every part of the game is entangled. A species trait will affect ethics, ethics affect governance, governance influences diplomacy, economy, stability, and rebellion. It's a machine of dominoes, and nudging one tile means the rest react, sometimes subtly and sometimes explosively. Layer in asymmetric AI personalities, randomized anomalies, shifting galactic resolutions, crises events, and hyperspace bottlenecks, and you're juggling 10 systems at once just to keep your empire from imploding, and you haven't even started a war yet. But whether you choose to engineer peace through diplomacy or dominate through a swarm of planet-killer weapons, your story builds itself from the systems that you nudge into motion. Across time, your civilization might evolve in unexpected directions. Economies restructure, the ethics drift, and the borders reshape themselves not just by war, but by culture. The complexity here lies in managing the civilization that you have and also adapting to what that civilization is becoming. Number 19. Void Stranger. It begins like a stylish NES top-down tribute. Simple tiles, clean movement, and puzzles that click into place with satisfying precision. But Void Stranger is bait. Behind its stark surface is a world of secrets, traps, and rituals, stitched together with the logic of a haunted escape room designed by a chess grandmaster. Every move costs you something, be it your time, your sanity, or just your last safety net, and the further you descend, the more the game seems to know that you're trying to outsmart it. You don't get any sort of tutorials or winks or nudges. If you die without protection, you can keep going, but some doors never reopen. But what's initiated as pure puzzle solving eventually mutates into something bizarre. Storylines emerge across multiple playthroughs with new characters who bring alternate mechanics and entirely fresh ways to interpret the world. Death becomes a choice. You can restart with nothing or go forward in a diminished void state that may permanently seal off parts of the game from you. There's a ton of deliberateness here. The limited saves, the one-way traps, the ambiguous visual cues. You can brute force a few puzzles early on, but the game quickly stops that type of thinking. There are entire layers hidden behind cryptic choices, optional areas that feel like you've wandered into a developer's private notebook, and endings that demand reverence. But more than anything, Void Stranger demands obsession. Puzzle mechanics expand and then dissolve into narrative structures that bleed back into gameplay. The lore feels ancient, like you're unearthing it tile by tile, and while there's a community to lean on, the most satisfying revelations come from sitting in the silence and letting the game change your questions. It's not here to play nice, but it always plays honest. You'll fail probably for hours, but when the solutions do finally start to click, it's like cracking open a locked vault inside your own brain. Number 20. Oxygen Not Included. In space, no one can hear you scream about plumbing. Oxygen Not Included is a survival sim where your biggest enemy isn't aliens or radiation, but more the humble toilet. Trapped inside an asteroid with a crew of cheerful yet dangerously incompetent duplicants, you'll need to engineer a breathable environment from scratch. That means building oxygen generators, filtering out carbon dioxide, managing water supplies, controlling heat, and praying that your elaborate ventilation system doesn't accidentally pump swamp gas into the bedrooms. Bit of a city builder, more of a habitat builder, but more than anything, it's a living burping machine that punishes carelessness with suffocation and diarrhea. So as usual, the real fun comes from how how everything comes together and connects. Your systems are deeply interdependent, and every solution introduces 3 new problems. Water cools your machinery, but also carries germs. Algae creates oxygen, but runs out fast. Power is precious, and batteries overheat unless you build cooling loops, which need pipes, and those need pumps, which need power, which needs... Yeah, you'll spend hours staring at charts, routing wires, and researching whether chlorine gas is good or bad for sleep quality. And automation only adds to the madness, giving you tools to program doors, schedule resource distribution, and build logic circuits, so you can finally create the Rube Goldberg toilet of your dreams. And just when you feel like you're on top of it all, Oxygen Not Included throws you into new biomes with heat waves, acid pools, or geysers that erupt with scalding steam at exactly the wrong time. Each colony is a chaotic puzzle made worse by the lovable incompetence of your duplicates, each with unique skills, bad habits, and a tendency to snore like leaf blowers. And there's lore here too, if you dig deep enough. Ancient ruins and mysterious tech hint at who built the asteroid, but good luck piecing all that together while your colony catches fire. This is the kind of experience where the challenge never really ends, but neither does the satisfaction of finally making a working bathroom that doesn't kill anyone. Number 21. Rain World. Game starts, and you're a soft little slug cat, tiny, squishy, and only marginally more competent than a sock puppet. But the world you've been dropped into has no patience for you. Everything is bigger, faster, or hungrier than you are, and survival hinges not on combat or crafting, but on understanding the ecosystem itself. Predators don't wait their turn or follow scripts. They have routines, rivalries, and the unnerving ability to learn. You'll spend your first hours figuring out where you are, the next few learning what's trying to kill you, and the rest wondering how a 2D platform manages to feel more dangerous than most survival horror games. Beneath the cuddly surface, Rain World hides one of the most interesting movement systems in the genre. Slugcat's locomotion feels loose at first, awkward and imprecise, but with time it reveals a ballet of wall hops, slide tackles, and pole climbs that let skilled players dance across screens with grace. Mastering this isn't optional, it's required. Areas are sprawling and unmarked, filled with physics-driven hazards, shifting weather patterns, and surprise lizards that don't mind treating your progress like a suggestion. And oh yeah, the rain, an apocalyptic flood that resets each cycle, making exploration a ticking clock, so don't dawdle unless you enjoy being liquefied into whatever the opposite of a slug cat is. The game ain't got no dialogue, nor quest logs, nor help. Lore is whispered through environmental cues, haunting music, and glimpses of a world that's long since moved on. Even secrets like whole zones or various endings are buried underneath layers of cryptic logic and spiritual implication. And if you're lucky, or cursed, you might stumble on another character's campaign with altered mechanics and a fresh helping of suffering. Rainworld has a lot to give you, piece by agonizing piece, but only if you're stubborn enough to keep crawling forward to get it. Number 22. Astronauts. Life aboard a broken-down spaceship drifting through the ruins of a collapsed solar economy isn't exactly a dream gig, but in Astronauts, that's all you've got. You are a shipbreaker captain, trying to stay afloat in a world where oxygen is currency and debt is eternal. You start with a scrap heap and a dream, slowly cobbling together a functional vessel from scavenged parts. But the parts have physics, the doors will jam, the wires short, and the toilets may explode. And to keep all of that from happening and getting it all to work is your job. It's part engineering and part panic management. Each and every system on board matters. Power grids have to be wired by hand, atmosphere must be filtered and redistributed, crew members need food, privacy, and emotional support, and they're all moody enough to unionize. These people aren't just faceless workers, they're fully simulated characters with habits, histories, and the ability to mutiny if they hate you enough. Keeping the morale high while also managing heat dissipation, pressure leaks, reactor maintenance, and whether or not your pilot is high on black market stims becomes an ever-escalating balancing act. The real genius of Astronauts is how it layers story into the mechanics. There's no traditional quest log or campaign, but there are fragments of news, overheard gossip, and environmental cues that point to a wider universe teetering on collapse. To master the game, you have to understand it, one duct tape bulkhead at a time, and when everything finally runs smoothly for a full shift, that's not peace. That's just the eye of the storm pretending to be a paycheck. Number 23. Cataclysm. Dark Days Ahead. It starts with a bang, a cough, or maybe a blob the size of a pickup truck crawling out of someone's garage. However, the end begins, and you're in it now, shoeless, clueless, and surrounded by an entire world that has decided to start falling apart in exquisite low-poly detail. Cataclysm: Dark Days Ahead is a turn-based survival sim that treats every moment like it could be your last, and designs systems detailed enough to make that true. Thirst, pain, hypothermia, blood loss, infected wounds, mental trauma, food poisoning, radiation sickness, you name it, we've got it. You'll be scavenging for supplies, triaging injuries, boiling water, building charcoal filters, skinning animals, crafting bone hooks, and doing all of that while trying to remember if you left the back door open when those gunshots rang out 3 houses down. The game will not be holding your hand because it'll be too busy simulating the chemical composition of your hand lotion. The crafting is complex and often absurdly granular, letting you sew together a Kevlar trench coat lined with fur and barbed wire, even if you've got the time and tools, that is. Vehicles aren't just a singular item, they're Frankenstein constructions of engines, batteries, seats, wheels, turrets, and kitchen sinks you looted from ruined suburbs. And those aren't just enemies, those are factions with motives and mutations and backstories stranger than the fungus that they've crawled out of. The sheer amount of variables at play at any given moment make every decision a gamble, every encounter a puzzle, and every death a lesson permanently carved into your brain. But from that very chaos arises a very particular type of freedom. You can build a solar-powered tank and cruise the highways, or become a mutant mole person who tunnels underground to avoid contact with reality. You could start a community, worship the blob, eat a book, hoard pine cones. There's room for all of it, and because the world is procedurally generated and full of buried secrets, you're never far from something you've never seen before. Cataclysm: Dark Days Ahead doesn't just simulate a ruined world, it lets you slowly, painfully master it, or at least survive long enough to die a more interesting death the next time. Number 24, Europa Universalis IV. So this one is more of a historical operating system. From 1444 to 1821, you take control of any nation on Earth and try to steer it through centuries of war, diplomacy, colonization, religious upheaval, and economic reform. The game tracks dozens of interlocking systems: military tech trees, naval supply range, dynastic succession, province autonomy, inflation, manpower reserves, government reforms, cultural assimilation, aggressive expansion, and trade node steering, all of this intermingling all at once, and you get to get in where you fit in this whole orchestration. You could play a tiny Italian city-state, and that feels nothing like managing Ming China, or a tribal nation in West Africa, because the rules of play shift based on geography, religion, cultural group, and historical events. The sheer weight of trying to know what to do is what makes the game so punishing to new players. Every button has a tooltip, every tooltip has submenus, and those submenus connect to long-term consequences that might not play out until 50 years later. You'll be managing rebel factions while juggling the intricacies of a royal marriage alliance that accidentally pulls you into a continent-wide war, and then you realize you forgot to manage your estates, and now the merchant class is demanding control of your best port. There's no one-size-fits-all strategy, because success depends on understanding very specific mechanics in the context of shifting global dynamics. Learning how to survive as a nation is hard. Learning how to become a great power without toppling your own internal stability, well, that takes hundreds of hours, and maybe a spreadsheet or two. Number 25, Dominion 6, Rise of the Pantocrator. So, this is what happens whenever a game asks, what if you were a god? And you had homework. You pick a faction, but you also design a pretender deity from scratch, choosing its physical form, magical paths, dominion scales, and sacred units. There are over 90 nations spread across 3 distinct eras, each with unique unit rosters, economy structures, magical synergies, and sometimes entirely different rules of play. You can create a frost giant prophet king that blesses wolf-riding shamans, or a dormant rainbow mage who will eventually awaken to unleash death magic across the world. The build variety you have at your disposal is staggering, with 10 paths of magic, hundreds of spells and units, and sacred troops that respond differently to dozens of bless combinations. There are literally millions of potential strategies, and that's just before turn 1. And from that point onward, the learning curve expands in all directions. You're drafting orders for dozens of commanders and provinces every turn, predicting enemy move turns in advance, and managing multi-layered systems, province defense, stealth armies, blood hunting, mercenaries, fort construction, gem income, remote site searching, battlefield scripting, and diplomacy, all whilst trying to divine the pretender god builds of your rivals based on how their sacred troops behave. And since battle outcomes aren't controlled directly, but rely on pre-scripted AI orders, every decision is made in advance and then committed with fingers crossed. Understanding the sheer volume of moving parts is only half the battle. The rest is grasping how they interact in a world where your opponents might be immortal, invisible, or on fire, and those are the balanced ones. Number 26, Mountain Blade 2, Bannerlord. You are born into a fully dynamic medieval sandbox with a sword, a horse, and more ambition than direction. From there, you carve out your identity, maybe as a merchant moving silks from distant lands, or a rogue leading a gang of looters, or a noble uniting the continent through diplomacy and war. But each path demands mastery over systems stacked on systems. Real-time combat, feudal politics, army logistics, siegecraft, family dynasties, trade mechanics, and a world simulation that keeps moving even when you don't. Every village has its own economy, every noble their own agenda, and every war its own tangled history of alliances and betrayal. The world does not bend to you. You have to push into it, shape it, and hope it doesn't break you in the process. What makes the game so difficult to grasp is how every layer connects to 5 others. Losing a battle might mean more than lost troops. It could lead to your capture, your fiefs revolting, and your rival clans absorbing everything you've built. Field tactics depend on terrain, formations, morale, and the ability to read the flow of chaotic battles as they're happening. As you grow in power, new responsibilities will pile on, managing vassals, brokering peace deals, securing supply lines, and preventing civil war within your own court. You're constantly juggling personal skill development with long-term strategic choices, and there's rarely a clean separation between the two. Success means learning how to be a warrior, a ruler, a tactician, and a politician, sometimes all in the same day. Number 27, Pathfinder Kingmaker. The aforementioned is built on the Pathfinder tabletop rule set, which means it arrives pre-wrapped in spreadsheets. Character creation alone lets you choose from dozens of classes, archetypes, races, and backgrounds, each with branching feat trees, spell lists, and multi-class options. You can create an Inquisitor who wields divine judgment with a glaive, or a rogue alchemist hybrid who throws bombs and picks locks, or a bard with 6 pets and a paralyze everything build. With well over 1,000 feats and abilities and near limitless multi-class potential, there are tens of thousands of viable builds, and just as many ways to break your run with one poor stat spread or poorly timed level up. The main push of complexity beyond the combat is the kingdom management layer, which turns you from adventurer to bureaucrat. As per tradition, you will be exploring dungeons, of course, but you'll also be appointing advisors, resolving political crises, upgrading towns, defending borders, and managing the mood of your populace across multiple regions. Failures in the throne room can lead to unrest, revolts, or outright game overs, and many of these events are timed, meaning you're constantly being forced to choose between adventuring and administration. Layered to top all of those goodies are alignment-specific decisions, hidden quest outcomes, and difficulty scaling that can swing wildly depending on your party's composition. So when it's all said and done, the game asks you to build a character, yes, but it also asks you to build a state, keep it running, and survive long enough to see why every choice you made matters. Number 28, Songs of Six. It starts relatively simple, a few settlers scraping together food and shelter in a lonely patch of wilderness. But the goal isn't survival, it's ascension. Over time, you'll build sprawling cities with tens of thousands of inhabitants, each one simulated individually. These citizens belong to different species, each with their own needs, prejudices, and labor strengths. You shall not simply be laying roads and rationing grain. You're managing caste hierarchies, constructing temples to secure loyalty, orchestrating education systems, drafting military units by species specialization, and maintaining a fragile balance between efficiency and revolt. Every room has a function, and every decision a ripple effect. What begins as a city builder will evolve eventually into a low fantasy empire sim where politics, religion, logistics, and infrastructure must all harmonize or crack under the weight of your ambition. What makes this game so brutal is how quickly things spiral if you miss a detail. Forget to diversify your food supply? Well, citizens will riot. Assign too few janitors? Disease spreads through dormitories. Overbuild without planning trade routes? Your economy grinds to a halt and your population starts eating raw grain and dying in filth. Systems are deeply interconnected, and mismanaging one, no matter how minor, can unravel a stable kingdom. And that's just the internal pressure. External threats like invasions, diplomacy breakdowns, and mercenary betrayals demand a whole second level of macro strategy. The game never punishes you arbitrarily, though. It just demands that you juggle city planning, social engineering, and war logistics with precision. It's an unforgiving simulation for those that feel like Dwarf Fortress needs more zoning laws. Number 29. Escape from Tarkov. This here is a psychological trial by fire slathered in military sim detail, set in a sealed-off war zone, crawling with PMCs, scavengers, and AI factions. It throws you into raids with a single goal: get in, loot, and extract alive. But survival means navigating a brutally realistic damage model. Limbs can be blacked out, blood loss requires tourniquets, hydration and energy drain constantly, and bullets interact with armor based on caliber, velocity, and material. Every single piece of your gear matters, down to bullet type and helmet face shield angles, and add in weight-based stamina, audio distortion under pressure, unreliable lighting, and an ever-looming permadeath inventory system, and every raid becomes a nerve-wracking gamble where hesitation kills. However, the sophisticatedness ramps up once you're out of the field. Tarkov's metagame is a labyrinth of hideout upgrades, trader reputation, bartering economies, ammo spreadsheets, flea market price tracking, and task chains that range from simple fetch quests to multi-hour no-death gauntlets. You don't have any in-game map, nor enemy indicators, no generous checkpoints. Every decision, which gun to bring, which key to use, which buildings to search, carries irreversible risk. Knowledge isn't optional here, it's required to even survive 10 minutes, let alone thrive. Your success hinges on a fluency in weapon modding, economy fluctuations, spawn rotations, and enemy psychology. It's not just about shooting better, it comes down to knowing more, preparing obsessively, and learning the hard way what happens when you don't. Number 30. X4 Foundations. This one, right at the get-go, will just plop an entire galaxy in your lap and say, figure it out. You start small, piloting a modest vessel through dynamic systems filled with traders, pirates, mining operations, and full-scale wars. Every ship station, economy, and NPC operates autonomously, in real time. You can dock at a station, walk inside, take missions, trade goods, or hijack another ship and claim it for yourself. But that's just the surface layer. The deeper you go, the more systems will reveal themselves. Fleet command, station construction, automated trade networks, diplomacy with multiple factions, and scripting behaviors for your AI subordinates. Every object in the galaxy persists, and every action has a plethora of potential consequences. The learning curve is wide, slow, and unforgiving. Even basic flight takes getting used to, with multiple control schemes and physics systems to juggle. Building a functioning trade route requires knowledge of market trends, sector security, ship design, and supply chain timing. Constructing a station is a multi-layered process involving blueprints, production cycles, workforce management, and raw material logistics, all whilst enemy factions or pirates might be probing your territory. Eventually, you'll be managing a corporation, interstellar defense, political relations, and internal AI task automation, all on top of flying the occasional mission yourself. The UI is deep as the Marianas Trench and obtuse. Tutorials are minimal, and most success comes from experimentation, failure, and reading player-made guides. But for those who stick with it, X4 offers a kind of open-ended mastery no other space sim can deliver. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's been watching these videos. I appreciate it more than you know. It has been lovely to be able to treat YouTube like a part-time job now, and I couldn't do it without you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and feel free to stop in throughout the week. I stream a few times here and there, and yeah, we have a lot of fun, so don't be a stranger. Thank you so much.